fellow nerds. Welcome back to Nerdy Psychology, the channel where we break down the mysteries of the mind with a side of fun and, well, a little bit of quirky vibes. I'm Dr. Angel, and today we're talking about something, well, we all do every day, but we often get it wrong. Communication. Picture this. You're telling your friend you had a rough day, and instead of listening, they're literally scrolling through their phone or playing a game. Or maybe you had someone interrupt you with a story with, like, you think that's bad? Let me tell you about my day. Does any of this sound familiar? Communication isn't just about resolving conflict, it's about connecting with people, connecting with others in a meaningful way. So let's dive in, and so we can learn how that we can improve our everyday interactions and make sure our words actually land where we want them to. Are you ready? Let's do this. First, let's talk about some common communication habits that might just be sabotaging your relationships, and you might not even be realizing it. We'll call these communication missteps. Phone distraction. Yes, we've all been guilty of this. Your friend, your spouse, your kids, they're sharing something important, and what are you doing? You're nodding along while you're scrolling on the Instagram or you're playing a game. Spoiler alert, they can tell you're not really paying attention. And it hurts their feelings. It makes people feel like what's important to them has no value to you. One-upping. Ooh, this one is literally a very personal pet peeve for me. This is where when someone's bad day suddenly becomes this competition. For example, oh, you had a rough commute? Well, I got a flat tire and I was late to work. It's totally like saying your feelings just don't even matter. They're not as important as mine. Or they send a message that your experiences or feelings only matter if they're the most severe or the most difficult. So many people come to therapy and they are dismissing their experiences and their feelings. They use statements like, well, I know people have had it worse, or this really isn't as bad as most of your patients. These are people who have been one-upped one more times than they can probably count. And they've internalized this belief that what they're going through is insignificant. Dismissiveness. Ever had someone ask how you're doing only to cut off or redirect the conversation totally back to themselves? So imagine this. You pick up the phone and you're calling somebody because you need some support. You're going through a difficult time. Like, hey, how are you doing? And you pour your heart out. You're like, I am waiting for the results of this medical test or a biopsy, and I am so scared, and I don't know what the future is going to be, and what will this be like for my children, and I don't know what's ahead. And they're like, oh, that's nice. Anyway, my boss yelled at me today. Could you even believe the nerve of him? What? Yeah, that's one to really tailspin someone, and that happens quite frequently. As Stephen Covey said, most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. The next one's mind reading expectations, and this is a biggie. Such a classic example, but I hear these kind of words all the time. If they really cared, they would know what I need. Or if they really knew me, they would know how I'm feeling. Red light, sorry to break it to you, but people are not psychic. Expecting others to read your mind is a recipe for frustration, disappointment, and a whole lot of hurt feelings. This is not a test of how much someone cares for you. It's just plain damaging, unhealthy, and honestly can be toxic. Projection and assumptions. Have you ever built an entire story in your head about someone's intentions? Like They didn't text me back because they were mad at me, or they're always late because they really just don't want to hang out with me, or they just invited me out of obligation, or keep that going, dot, dot, dot. These made up narratives often create unnecessary tension for ourselves and our lives and in our relationships. These narratives become those proverbial hamsters in our head that spin around on the wheel all night long, where we keep just replaying these conversations and these thoughts and these stories over and over and over in our mind and our heads. And they can become this self-fulfilling prophecy. We might just start looking for the words or the actions to support the narratives, to make those narratives true. I had a client, we'll call her Sarah, who would get upset when her sister didn't check in with her. She'd think, well, she cared, she'd call me first. But when they finally connected, Sarah's sister admitted she'd just been overwhelmed and she assumed Sarah was too busy to chat. See how mind reading leads to misconnections? Now let's talk about the elephant in the room: digital communication. Don't get me wrong, texting and emails, they're great. They're great for quick updates, to get information out. They're terrible when it comes to deep or meaningful conversations. And here's why. We're going to go through a whole laundry list here, so stick with us. Tone. Tone is so easy to misinterpret. A text that says, sure, whatever, and writing could mean agreement. It could mean sarcasm. Without vocal tone or body language, it's so easy to misread intent. Here are some examples. We'll break it down a little bit more. Misunderstanding the tone. So sarcasm can go wrong really quickly. Something that says, great, just what I needed today, can have an intended tone of genuine enthusiasm or gratitude, but it could be perceived as sarcasm or implying frustrations. This is a good classic one next. The period problems in our text messages. You know, that little dot at the end of what we put that some people put and some people don't, can mean a whole lot depending on where it's going. So someone might text fine, period. That intended tone might have just been neutral acknowledgement, not really meaning anything special. It could be perceived as cold, annoyed, or dismissive just because it had a period at the end. Ambiguous humor. This one can get into a lot of misunderstandings. A text that says something like, you're such a genius, LOL, can have an intended tone of being playful or teasing, but it could be perceived as insulting, belittling, not happy, not good. The next one can be the short one, the letter K or the word okay spelt out. This response can have a text that says, K, intended tone, quick acknowledgement, got your message, we're good. Perceived tone might be passive aggressive or dismissive. Who knew one little letter can have so much meaning on it, right? All caps. This can lead to lots of missteps. Text. All caps saying, why didn't you tell me? Question mark. Intended tone could be excited and curious. The perceived tone could be angry, accusatory, or yelling. And then emojis. Let's face it, if you've ever really scrolled through all the emojis, there's tons and tons and tons and tons of emojis. And well, who knows what half of those really are doing or saying or meaning anyway, because it's up to how we see that. So emojis can go wild so quickly in text messages. So a text that has, I'm fine, with like a little upside down smiley face could be sarcastic or humorous, but it could be perceived as so confusing. They're not sure if you're really fine. Are you being passive aggressive? What's really going on? And I have a really great kind of story to kind of go through with some of these text miscommunications. I was once throwing a party at my house and I was getting all the things done, and I realized I really didn't have enough ice for the number of people attending. And so I texted my friend who I knew she was going to pass the 7-Eleven on her way over. And I said, hey, could you pick me up a few bags of ice? I'll pay you back when you get here. And she just replied with a letter, why? So I replied, well, I just don't have enough time to go get ice and I have so much to do and I'm trying to finish up all the prep work. So could you please pick it up for me? And she replied, the letter, why again? Okay. I was like so frustrated at that point. I was just like, never mind. I'll get it myself. I'll see you when you get here. When she got to the house, I looked at her and I said, what happened? She said, why meant yes. I thought she was asking me the question, why? And I thought I had to defend why I needed some help in that moment. And I was so frustrated in those moments. And yet, just a text message of her telling me she would do something was totally misinterpreted. And that was so benign. And we were able to have that conversation. But at the end of the day, something that small can really lead to problems in relationships. Texting and written communication also leads to that lack of immediate feedback. When we're having in-person conversations or on the phone conversations, it really allows for some clarification in real time. We're doing this in the moment, synchronous together. But when we are using text communication or email communication, it's asynchronous. We're not in the same time at the same space having the same conversation. And so misunderstandings can linger, they can fester, and they sit on that wheel in our mind and are going over and over and over and over. Some examples can be how that lack of immediate feedback can lead to miscommunication. Lingering doubts. You send the heartfelt text like, hey, I just really wanted to apologize to you for snapping at you earlier. I took out my frustrations on you and I really didn't mean it. So if someone's not giving you an immediate response, you can totally spiral into anxiety with that feeling like, oh, are they still mad at me? Do they forgive me? Are they ignoring me? Are they punishing me? Like, what's happening? Then we can have some assumptions about those delays. Another scenario could be you could text someone and be like, hey, are we still on for tonight? And they don't reply for hours. Without context, you might just assume they're flaky or they're disinterested or they're angry or are they even going to show up? When in reality, they just might be busy and may not have looked at their phone. There's no room for clarification. This one can really be a big one. So a text like, hey, I'm not sure what you meant by that. So here we're trying to do good communication and follow up and seek clarification. But if we don't get immediate feedback in that moment, we're still left guessing whether the original message was intended to be criticism, advice, support, or something entirely different. Then it can escalate misunderstandings. I can't tell you the number of times I have people come into the office and they've had this exchange and this interaction with someone via text or email, and they pick up the phone and they're reading it to me. And every time they're reading the messages, they're reading it in the tone of voice that they perceived it to come at. And so it's just growing and growing that this is anger or this is frustration or this is sarcasm or this is being petty or passive aggressiveness, when the reality of it could have meant so many different things. And so vague texts can also lead to some of those misunderstandings. So because it leaves the person having to kind of fill in blanks. And when we have to fill in blanks, it can get us in a little bit of trouble. So I'll give you like a whole different scenario here. Like this is one that I think most people get really anxious when they see this or hear this in a conversation of vague text like, hey, we need to talk later. Oh my gosh, that text or that conversation of, hey, we need to talk later leads people to totally tailspin. Now they're assuming this worst case scenario. They're going through all the thoughts in their minds, all the conversations in their minds, and they're going, oh my gosh, did I do something wrong? Did I say something wrong? Did I not say something I was supposed to say? Did I offend them? Did I hurt their feelings? Blah, 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 blah. And they just spirals and spirals and spirals and spirals. And without that clarification, we just can take off with that and create these worst case scenarios. Our anxiety is like all going on, and all we can think of is, why are they upset with us? Are they breaking up with us? Are they wanting to leave the relationship? Did we make them angry? Did we lose this business deal? Whatever is happening, we're going through the worst case in our mind. And don't say you do not do it, because I know you do. We all kind of do not like that conversation. And so having that really can, by the time we have that conversation, we've all been worked up in our mind and our head and our anxiety. And it can be, a lot of times they can be very benign conversations of like, hey, I thought we should plan a party for our friend, or hey, let's talk about date night ideas, or hey, do we want to sign the kids up for basketball? Like, it can be those really small little things. I'm just bookmarking, I want a conversation with you. But when I don't give enough information, now you have to really fill in a gap. And most of us go to, what did I do wrong? Or what's going to happen? Because it doesn't feel very good in that moment. And then it's so easy to misjudge the emotional state. So a short reply like, sure, whatever, could just be read as totally dismissive or totally annoyed. In reality, they just might be rushing or multitasking, and they're just trying to get back to you and let you know, I saw that. It's great. I'm good with it. And to keep going on their thing. So it can definitely create unnecessary conflict, unnecessary feelings of, I'm not valued, or I'm not important, or they don't care. And like, those are the things we start seeing and interpreting in our mind. And I'm going to challenge you. I want you to go back through your text messages. I want you, as you go through the week, if you feel a little something in a message, or you feel like this could be negative, like, look at that situation. What's happening in that moment? Because we go through this more often, I think, than we even put focus that we go through it. And then when we're using electronic communications, any of them, we just, you cannot, no matter what, replicate that human connection. So we get this emotional disconnect. So, like a warmth of a hug, or that reassurance, or that kind smile, that doesn't come over a screen. It doesn't come in an email. Superficial conversations, they happen all the time this way. And I don't care how many emojis we use, it doesn't replace that connecting, that feedback that we get in those moments. So a friend might say, hey, how's it going? And a response could be, fine, you? Like, this is just surface conversation. It's superficial level exchange. It lacks depth. It doesn't invite meaningful conversation or connection. It didn't elaborate on anything. I really have no idea what's going on in your world. And so over time, these interactions tend to make relationships feel distant and not supportive. And they often can lead that relationship to continuing falling a wayside, because we're not connecting in a way that's meaningful. Again, those delayed responses. When someone says, hey, I really just need to talk, I've had a tough day, and it takes someone hours to get back with them, and then they're like, oh, sorry, just saw this, what's up? That delayed response can feel like a lack of care. I'm not important. The other person really, they're not really supportive. This can feel like neglect, or abandonment, or unimportance, or invisibility. And so that just having a time gap. And in reality, the other person could have been all kinds of swamped. We felt like, oh, it's intentional. Oh, they just ignore me. They answer everybody else's texts right on the spot, but they ignore my text. Like, we start writing those stories in our minds. I hear them all the time. The overthinking tone, again, that let's talk later. So let's talk later. Overthinking, we're taking that anxiety up. We're bringing that anxiety way up. So without those emotional cues, or voice, or face expressions, or even just follow up in the moment, like, okay, what's this going to be about, so I can be prepared, and then be like, oh, I want to talk about vacation ideas. Oh, you know what? Cool. We're good. Got you. We will totally talk later. Like, you don't have that part in that text message usually. Or if you have that delay, you're just having so much more anxiety than you need to have. This misalignment of emotional timing. So an example could be, I just got a promotion, exclamation mark. And they might take hours to get back to you, and they're like, cool, congrats. That delay can just feel like dismissiveness, or you leave you to feeling deflated or not celebrated. And so again, it sends a message. Just timing can send those messages to us. Ghosting or unintentional ignoring. You might reach out and say, hey, it's been a while. You want to catch up? And maybe it takes some days to get back to you. Or maybe they don't respond and you feel rejected or unimportant or all kinds of way. And maybe their silence was completely unintentional. Maybe they genuinely didn't see your message come in. Maybe it got buried. Maybe they have been going through a difficult thing and they just didn't have any more emotional bandwidth to handle anything else and to respond to things. Maybe they got distracted. Like, there's so many things that it could be, but oftentimes we're going to go perceive that silence as, oh, never mind. And now we feel rejected. And by the time we do reach out to them, we're feeling some kind of way. And we already got this like distance wedge happening in this relationship. And the other person may have absolutely zero clue what even occurred. Lack of context for that emotional support. So, like, context is important. Phrases like, oh, I can't take this anymore can mean a whole heck of a lot. And someone could just reply, oh, hang in there. And that brevity with no context leads to no quality connection, no quality support, no quality way of managing what's going on. We have no genuine empathy in that moment. That person might feel unheard or invalidated, or it might, whatever's happening, we really have no idea what that means. That could literally fill that blank and could mean so many different things. We can also feel like we're having those one-sided conversations. So, I'm feeling so overwhelmed today. Like, that's a big thing to throw out. And someone might just reply, ugh, I know, my day was crazy too. Well, there's a lack of acknowledgement for feelings, and that can make someone feel very dismissed and disconnected. Do you see the theme? Dismissed, disconnected, rejected, not enough, less of value. And then we wonder why we are telling ourselves these stories in our mind that people don't want to be around us, or there's something wrong with us, or we're broken, or we're weird, or whatever. Fill the blank in. We feel those ways a lot of times in our relationships. And each one of these miscommunications leads us to feeling one of these ways. One of my clients once ended an entire friendship over a misinterpreted text. The message was meant as a joke, but without context, it came off as rude. And if they would have just picked up that phone, they could have avoided that entire mess. Let's keep the conversation going. And hey, if you found today's episode helpful or informative, give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. We've got plenty more psychology packed fun coming your way. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and keep your mind nerdy and keep those conversations healthy. See you next week.